G'day everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Australian Property Investment Podcast. So I just want to start off by saying thank you for all the messages. We're getting some awesome DMs. We're getting some awesome feedback as well. So I want to say thank you very much. Keep it coming in because your feedback means I know what's hitting the spot. I also know what guests you want to have on as well. And today's guest, if you've listened to any property podcast, if you're in the world of finance and property, you're going to know this name, Dan Beardall from Both Sides. G'day, mate. How you doing?
Good, mate. Yourself?
Excellent. Thanks. We just said before, how is it to be on the other side of the microphone?
It's funny you say that because I'm actually a little bit nervous.
Don't be.
Which is, being on your side, typically you're okay, you're in the driver's seat. The nerves are on the speaker, and now I am that person speaking. So, mate, I'm a little bit nervous.
That's all right, mate. You got empathy for your guests. So, mate, we're going to go through a little bit about, I guess, your journey, your story, what you do in the buyer's agency world as well. But like I said, Both Sides has kind of it's double edged with your buyer's agency, but also the podcast that you put out as well. And I guess that's really, I don't know, it's a podcast about podcasts, but let's go there because. I mean, you've got a really strong connection to some industry leaders as guests. You've got a strong engagement with your listeners as well. How's it been, the journey of kind of launching Both Sides?
Mate, it's a great question. I think it's a good topic to share with those people that are, I know it may not necessarily be super property related, but the story might resonate for people in any industry you're in. So to give you some context, I just started out working as a buyer's agent, got my buyer's agency license and was working for a firm, Henderson Advocacy at the time in the eastern suburbs. So when I was in finance and lending, had bought a property prior, and I'm in now a buyer's agent role, and I'm, okay, how do I start building relationships with the top real estate agents to A, get access to stock that otherwise I wouldn't be able to, and B, generate business and referrals. So at the time I was about 22, maybe turning 23. I think
spring chicken.
Yeah, spring chicken, right? I'm like, who wants to go and if I'm going to call up Gavin Rubenstein at 22, Gavin, can you come meet me for coffee? The likelihood of him saying yes is no, right? Yeah. So the way I viewed it back then is, let's say my scorecard, and I use this as an analogy for people to understand, back then was say a 2 out of 10 versus someone like a Gavin Rubenstein, his scorecard's a 10 out of 10.
Yes.
And when you've got such a gap like that, it's really hard to build rapport. And I recommend most people think of that analogy, whether they be in sales, they're looking to date somebody, or anything business related. Think, what is your scorecard relative to the person you're looking to build a relationship with? Fine. So to tell you the truth, the podcast was just something I started out with no expectation of, just to meet people, build relationships, and like I said, commercially get an edge up relative to other buyer's agents or my current position.
Yep.
And mate, we started off interviewing people on Zoom, the first 5, before we started doing in-person events. And one thing's led to another, and it's just snowballed into its own beast, where it's given us opportunity to get access now to properties across the country off market where we otherwise wouldn't be able to because of the brand. And so many real estate professionals or even brokers now know who I am without me even having to have met them, which is crazy, right?
Which means your scorecard's now going to a...
Which my scorecard's not. And mate, I'm 20, I turned 26 this Sunday.
Nice.
So I'm still relative in my career, still quite young relative to a lot of people. So it's just given me that edge where people view me as a greater expert, or I'm associated with these people. So they view my scorecard now as higher than what it maybe should be. Yeah. So mate, that's kind of the process behind it. So I think the relevance to anyone listening, whether you're in real estate or not, is if you are looking at getting into a new career, think, how can you leverage as much as possible? Because what I've learned through property is that leverage is the key to growth. Yeah. And speaking to people like Sam Gordon, who we were just chatting about off air, is like, Dan, if you really want to scale your buyer's agency, we've got to talk about leverage and how we're going to position things in that sense. So the podcast for me now is at a stage where it's greater than just a vehicle for me to build relationships with agents. It's now opening up other doors, which is fantastic. But originally it was to, how do I build relationships with the top 1%, get access to properties for clients, and then possibly referral business back internally?
Because people were scratching their heads going, how on earth did you get, you talk about captains of industry.
Yeah.
Gav Rubenstein, Tom Panos, Sam Gordon. It's like a roll call of who's who effectively in the real estate and finance world. But you've kind of just gone, hey, mate, it's not hard. I picked up the phone. I took some action, and here we are having a conversation with them. It's not that hard. Do you kind of look at that going, it's not that hard, and without any tickets on yourself?
Yeah, mate, I remember, probably only the first 10 episodes in or something like that, and I cold call Emil Jurassic.
Right.
For anyone who doesn't know him, he owns NGU Real Estate in Queensland, big offices, big developer, does hundreds of millions of dollars worth of deals. This guy is not a spring chicken.
Yes.
And I picked up the phone and I just cold called him. I was like, mate, this is what we're looking at doing. Would you be open to just coming on the podcast? We'd love to learn off you. And he's like, mate, we're in. I'm in. Wow. Come to my office. Like, I'll set it up for you. Like, let's go. And was so generous with his time. And at the time, mate, I was, again, like now, a bit of nerves and just lent into it and had a crack. And you'll be amazed to see what people are willing to do and just give back if you ask.
Yeah.
Not all the time we'll get a yes. Sometimes we'll get a no. And sometimes it takes the third or fourth ask before they say yes. Like Simon Cohen, we had to prospect him hard. Gavin Rubenstein, we had to have runs on the board. So it takes time. So if you do get a no, don't just be discarded.
But that's also life in general.
It's life in general.
If you get a no the first time around, where's the resilience or the persistence?
That's it.
Maybe they're just saying no to see who actually will stand up and say, actually,
yeah. And
I do want to pursue this.
100%, and especially being in that real estate, which is a predominantly prospecting, let's see what you're made of industry. I think a little bit of that, they want to see how serious are you?
Yeah.
Like,
can't sell to a salesperson, mate. They know all the tricks, right?
That's right. So
excellent.
Yeah,
we'll come back to the podcast in a second, but a little bit about your own journey. You sound we were having chat before.
Yeah,
22. You found yourself running your buyer's agency. You worked in finance.
Yeah.
You're a young bloke at 26.
Yeah.
What have the last few years kind of taught you, mate?
Mate, so I can break it up into two parts. So my career started off learning the theory about business, sales, property, investing, finance, before I transitioned into the practical side.
Okay.
So that's just my story and what I can speak truth on. Just a precursor, I'm not somebody that's got $10 million in property. Like, I'm not somebody that's...
No, mate, don't say that. We've had people in here that have bought a couple. When I say a couple, they've bought a few investment properties. That's it. They're not at the finish line. They're starting out and they're sharing their journey.
So I can just share from my age with all I've learned and my experience being a buyer's agent, dealing with the top 1% and going through the trade, so to speak. So I started out in finance learning how do you structure a deal from a lending perspective. So I used to work at a company called Paramount Mortgages. We were a non-conforming and private aggregator, mortgage manager, where I used to see people that had 40 properties come saying, I want a 41st. I used to see people come to us doing construction deals, land banks, second mortgages, caveat loans, commercial deals, like all these different types of financing. And at the time I was like, oh my God, like these people are doing amazing things and I'm getting access to seeing how it's achieved through equity release, debt recycling, all these different strategies. And at the time I got given a book when I was 16 and was doing work experience for the company I ended up working for, Paramount. Yeah. And at the time I was like to the owner, Sean, what would be the number one book you'd give if you were starting out and wanted to succeed? And he's like, Dan, read Rich Dad Poor Dad. Yeah. Okay. So at 16, I read this book, Rich Dad Poor Dad, which already planted the seed is that I'm buying a property. Whatever I do, I'm buying a property because that's my ticket out, right? Yeah. So then I go do work experience for him at 16. Then when I finish high school, I'm like, look, what do I do? I know I wanted to be in business and I wanted to be a business owner and I also wanted to buy a property. Had no idea. So I said, Sean, look, I've just come out of school. I'm going to do commerce finance at uni, but I'd love to just start working for you for free just to learn the ropes of terminologies. How do you mingle, network, like just tricks of the trade.
Yeah. The soft skills,
which you can't learn unless you're on the job. Like uni doesn't teach you how to network and build relationships. Uni teaches you spreadsheets, financial modeling, which is the theory side, which again, I'll partner with the practical side in a second. But leading back in, I started working for free for the first 3 to 6 months to just get a feel for it before I could even add value to the firm. Anyways, I was 18 and I had the first opportunity to become a BDM where you'd start going to all the brokers in the country and pitching for business essentially. So that was my first taste of what was out there. So I got to see through working in finance how people would structure loans, equity release, buy properties, and it planted the seed that, hey, this isn't too far from reality. Like I could buy my first property quite soon. So I was lucky to be surrounded by that at an early age. And
lucky is one, but you also worked for free, mate. There's not,
yeah.
You make your own luck a little bit.
You do. So that's right. Like, and it was a struggle. Like, I won't get me wrong. There were times where I was paying to meet people, network.
Yeah.
And I was working a second job to pay for that coffee.
Absolutely.
So it was a quite of a slog at the time. I was doing uni, and then it got to the point where I could add value to the group and started getting remunerated. And I did that where I got my trade, so to speak, finished my apprenticeship in finance. And then COVID happened. I was like, okay, shit, what am I going to do? So I actually engaged a buyer's agent to help me buy my first property.
Nice one.
And that was like, oh my God, like I kind of like how somebody can do that level of service. And I went to a Tony Robbins seminar with Sean, who was the owner of Paramount.
Yeah. Game changer, isn't it?
When I was 19, game changer. Yeah. And I went to this Tony Robbins event, changed my whole trajectory of life. Anyways, at the event, the guy behind me was a super high net worth individual who had done 60 deals, multi-millionaire who lives on a waterfront property in Sydney. I won't get into much details, but we ended up sparking a relationship. Anyways, we had some communications. COVID happened, and I called him at the time. I was like, I'll pretend his name was John. John, this is my plan. Do you reckon you could help me? And at the time, because I was in finance at uni, I was learning about leveraged buyouts, how you could buy companies, no money down. We were doing loans with judo banks. So I was like, I'm going to just buy a company with no money down, like leveraged buyout. I'm going to find a motivated seller who's 60, and I wanted to buy companies, right? And he's like, Dan, come to my house. And he did like a session with me and was like, help me to work out what I wanted to achieve. And anyways, one thing led to another. And through our session, he's like, what we need to do is get you to meet a guy who's the top 1% in the property space so you can start talking with the best of the best. So what you learn through Tony Robbins and dealing with the best of the best is that they only get advice from the top or the best of the best, right? If you want to learn something, you go to the best. If you want to learn how to cook a meat pie, you go to the best meat pie chef. If you want to go learn how to mow the lawns, whatever it may be, go to the best. And so he actually introduced me to a billionaire who had sold his portfolio for 1.75 billion.
Right.
Which at the time was like crazy. I was like, oh my God.
Not M's anymore, we're talking B's.
B's. I was like, oh my God, like there's actually a billionaire that lives in Australia? Like I had no idea. Anyways, you wouldn't even know this guy is a billionaire if you met him. And he's like, Dan, if you want to get to where you want to be, you need to learn property. You need to learn how to find a property, what makes a good property from a bad. He's like, essentially get your real estate license. So you've got your trade in finance, which is great because at the time I wanted to be a developer. Apart from buying companies, my goal was always become a developer. So he was like, Dan, if you want to learn to become a developer or do options where you use a different form of contract where you do an options contract, etc., you got to learn how to find deals. It's all good and well to have this theory, but you need the practical side. Yeah. So his advice was go get your real estate license, go work for somebody who's the top, surround yourself with the top, and then learn for your own self how to discern a good deal from a bad. So that's kind of the path that led for me. So I'd spoke to him. I did some work with this guy that was the high net worth mentor for me. Yeah. Kind of privately as his accountant, financial advisor, so to speak, just with his current portfolio, and just learned his habits and tricks and how he dealt and did business for 6 months before I transitioned to real estate. Wow. And another coach of mine at the time, Jeff Jowett, was also a coach to Jack Henderson, who owns Henderson Advocacy, which is a very large investment buyers agency. And he's like, Dan, have a chat to Jack. And one thing led to another. And that's how I started in the property space. So did some time with Jack. For whatever reason, it didn't work out. The fit wasn't right. But I learnt a lot. And Jack at the time was, although he's young, was extremely good and worked 100 hours a week and was networking with the top 1%. So I also got experience, and he was doing 100 deals per year. So I got experience to a large amount of volume very quickly and also surrounded by really great people. So did my time there, kind of learnt the ropes there before I started Both Sides Buyers Agency. But before I started Both Sides Buyers Agency, Both Sides Podcast came first, which gave me the platform and the branding and the confidence to then open my own business in the buyers agency. So that's kind of my background story around how my journey's progressed. It's a lot of it's been organic, but also me taking action. So I'll take action to go to this event, but then you might meet somebody who then opens a door for you there. So that's kind of been my journey. It's just this blessing of meeting the right people that open up a journey, but then also having the courage to lean into that fear and just have a crack. And mate, I fail forward all the time.
Still, I don't think if that's the ethos now, that'll never leave you.
No.
And I feel like you've had this rhythm in your life where it's like, nothing ventured, nothing gained. I'm going to do a little bit for free or cut my teeth as an apprentice, and that then supercharges your growth. So it's almost like you slow down to speed up. So look at the finance part. I'm going to work for free, improve myself, bit of hunger in the belly, but it's going to project me even further.
Yeah.
Same with your buyer's agency side. I'm going to maybe take a detour, meet with someone who's best in breed, but that's going to like take me right to the very top. And it's not there's any shortcuts to success, but you can always supercharge that. That journey.
And my mentor at the time said, Dan, what you want to do is you want to look, he calls it peeking under the tent. It's an older analogy where you want to go, essentially, you want to work for somebody who you can learn off their mistakes and they can pay for you to learn rather than starting your own business prematurely just for the sake of saying you're a business owner to only fail when you could have learnt those mistakes under somebody else.
Yes.
So he was very, very big on that because before I worked for Jack, I was just going to start as my own buyer's agent business beforehand. And he said, look, Dan, trust me on this. Peek under the tent of somebody else. Go work, learn the systems, procedures, how to actually operate before doing your own. So that would be the advice I'd give to anyone starting out who wants to be in business. You don't have to do it too early. Like I would even say there've been parts where I would say I'm a bit premature at times, but it's just lucky that I've got the right people around me, mentors and guidance, so that if I do get stuck, I can pick up the phone and problem solve. But again, there might be superstars out there who are better than me years ahead that can start early. It just depends on your story. And that's another thing too, like playing the cards you're dealt. Yeah. And I'll talk to this when it comes to buying properties. Like everyone wants to know what the best strategy is in the market, what's the best area to buy in, what's the best this, best that. But a lot of the time, it's just understanding the current cards you're dealt. What is your access to capital? What is your risk appetite? What is your expertise? How experienced are you? A lot of people think they're very experienced, especially Australians think they're expert at property. And if you aren't experienced, can you partner with people that are? Which is why buyers agents or buyers advocacy is a really good model for people that, like myself at the time, had got the experience. And I partnered with somebody that did to get a desired outcome. So that's a bit of the story, mate. I kind of lost my train of thought, but yeah.
What did you say? You're 26?
26.
Did you go like are you called an old soul?
I am called an old soul.
I'm talking to you about it. I don't feel like I'm talking to a 26-year-old.
I often relate better to older people than I do my own age.
Yeah. A sense of maturity about that, especially when I talk to younger Australians, and you probably see this when you're doing in the buyer's agency side, the questions that they're asking, and I can see it. They're trying to like shortcut this. Like you're going there. Where's a hot spot? Where am I buying? What are they doing? And you're like, I get that. I get the fervor, and there's some little bit of impatience there. But how do we channel that into going, hey mate, you're young, you're 20 something, you're earning 60, 70K, sometimes a little bit well more than that. But the cards that you're dealt means you don't have strong savings. Yeah. Maybe you don't have the bank of mum and dad to rely on like other people do. You don't have the borrowing capacity like other people do. So you can't compete with someone like a Sam Gordon or, or past guests that I've had on that have decent portfolios. You're watching the finished product. You're starting your journey. Someone's got to take you under the wing like someone took you under their wing and said, patience, 100%. My little friend. You know?
And mate, I'll be the first to admit I'm the biggest ambitious monkey out there that's like, I can achieve everything and anything now. Yeah. But we're not, it's funny how you mature as each age. Now I look back at my younger self like, mate, you were just too ambitious at times. You needed to slow down. So but it takes learning and maturity to go through that. So for people that are starting out, so for me, 4 years essentially learning the theory. Then the next 4 years was learning the practical side of finding deals, dealing with agents, negotiating, understanding how to source property, which you can't learn in the theory side. So when I was at uni, I used to look at real estate agents and think they had no idea when it comes to property investing. Yeah. They're just selling agents. They're just salespeople. Don't listen to them. Then I become in real estate an agent. And then I think these guys are just idiots, theory-based, got nothing. They don't know how to negotiate. They don't know dialogue. I can milk everything out of them. Like, it's funny how your perspective changes, right?
Totally.
And then now I've kind of got this holistic perspective, and mate, I've only just scratched the surface compared to what is out there in terms of information. Like, I'm only 8 years in versus people that are 10, 20 years in that have a lot more experience than me. But what I would say to anyone that's starting out is like kind of what you said, it's okay. So play the cards you dealt, and there's no harm. Like, I often see people that are premature to buy trying to rush the process, and it's okay to not buy at 20 or 19. It's okay to buy at 26. It's okay to buy at 35. Like, 100%. Don't just rush it for the sake of it.
First time buyer age in Australia is 36, 37, right?
There you go. Yeah. So like, I would say that would be the first thing is like, it's okay to not, like, don't compare yourself. It's okay to be where you are, but then let's look at the cards you have.
Yeah.
So like you said, if you're 19, what do you have? Do you have the banker mum and dad who own a $2 million home with a low LVR, which you could leverage off them for a deposit? How much is your income per annum? Okay, do you earn 60 grand? Do you earn 100 grand? What's the serviceability we've got to play with? If you've got low serviceability and you've got low expertise and you don't have the banker mum and dad, then it's time to go to the marketplace, upskill your expertise, upskill your income, and forget about property for the time being. It's okay. Or if you have the banker mum and dad who can help with the deposit, you're earning 100 grand and you lack expertise, that's when a buyer's agent can come into play and help you buy and get in the market. So that would be my kind of thing, is just step one is don't worry about the hotspot, where to buy, the strategy. Focus on what's your current capacity from a serviceability, your access to capital. And then from there, who are the right experts that can guide you into just the first deal?
Well said.
Yeah. Hope that makes sense.
Hey, it makes excellent sense. Well done. And I want to talk about the buyer mindset, because I talk heavily around you. Again, you're probably big on this as well. The buyer mindset. I say there's two types of buyers. It doesn't matter if you're buying your own home, buying investment. There's the active and there's the passive. Yeah. And there's things that differentiate them significantly. And you can see the people that are active. A couple of telltale signs to me is, one, they want to get pre-approved. Yeah. Yeah, it's no brainer. Others are like the passive ones are going, oh, I'll keep looking and I'll get pre-approved down the line. Like, come on, mate, you're going to cause more stress for yourself as well. And you can't actually negotiate. Most buyer's agents won't even take you on as a client unless you're actually pre-approved. Yeah. And then it's like the strategy. Then it's, okay, what are we buying? But not the first one. Then we're thinking, this one happens. What happens down the line as well around future borrowing capacity, around releasing equity as well. So when you're sitting down with someone and you can quickly figure out and filter for who's an active versus who's a passive, what are the other telltale signs that you're looking for? It's
a great point you bring up. So from a buyer's agent perspective, I would see somebody only being an active buyer if they're out in the marketplace, calling 100 agents a day, sourcing off markets. They're inspecting 100 properties a month. They're actually doing the activity it takes to find a deal. You could be pre-approved, scrolling realestate.com. To me, that's passive investing or buying. Anything that's real estate, if you're just scrolling realestate.com, that's, so for people that are thinking about becoming a buyer's agent or wanting to find a deal or wanting to succeed, scrolling realestate.com is not an activity that's you do to get there, in my opinion, from the people that I've learnt from and from doing it myself. So I think there's a big gap between what we think is active and passive, and that I think if I could share with people out there, if you actually have the desire to buy a property, you need to be doing the basics that lead to getting you the best outcome, which is having coffees with the top agents in the suburb you're buying into. If you can't have coffees with them because your scorecard's too low, you're not a developer, you're not a buyer's agent, you're a 2 out of 10, a random, a 19-year-old, that's okay. What's the next best alternative? Meeting the associate. So just be creative with doing the activity it takes. So you need to be having appointments with agents, picking up the phone and calling. Scrolling realestate.com is a passive way of getting a feel for the marketplace. You're not an active buyer yet, in my opinion. Yeah. Even if you have a pre-approval, if you're passively scrolling, it doesn't lead to a result. So that would be my share. And it's okay. Like, if you don't have the formula, you don't want to, you're scared to pick up the phone and it's not the right fit, again, buyer's agent can help you. But I think there's a big gap between what people think it takes to get the right result. But the good news is when you do those simple basic actions, the result's so much easier than you think. Like doing those actions can be very scary for people, but just once you do them, the results become easier than what you think they are. You've just got to do the work.
Yeah. That's why they call it the work, right?
Yeah. And it's hard. Like even, mate, there are times where I'm sourcing and I'm calling agents in areas that I don't want to be calling them. And I'm like, mate, this is a grind. I don't want to be doing it. So it happens. It's happened and it's okay.
Yeah. By a brief, how do you take someone that's got, I want to do this, I want to develop, and a bit like what you said, it's a bit scattered going, I want to develop, I want to do this, I want to go and build a portfolio, easy target. Like, how do we distill this down to a very clear brief that both sides can deliver on?
It's a great question. So I'm fortunate because of my experience and my access to the top information. I can quickly, if anyone could come to me with their scenario, and I can pretty much on the spot know what a good strategy would be for their situation.
And you've got two really good skills because you can see it from a property side, but also you're
lending
quickly
side.
going from a finance side. Can this even stack up?
Yeah, that's right. So the four main things I want to know with a potential. So if anyone's an apprentice, if people are new in their property journey in terms of strategy, number of properties they own, then I want to look at things like the access to capital, how much capital growth they're looking to be holding. Are they a passive investor or an active where do they want to do a renovation, a flip, or do they just want to buy, set and forget, let the location do the work? What level of rental income can they afford to hold?
Yeah.
It's all good and well to want to buy these blue chip capital growth properties, but can you afford to have the negatively geared portion? And at what expense does that impact your ability to still have a good lifestyle, or how much does that impact your ability to be in a higher affluent location? So it depends on what your goals are, not just as an investor, but commercially outside of property as well. I think it's really important. For me, I'm a rent investor. I wouldn't buy a home that's going to hold me down where I'm having to pay these repayments on something, because for me, I'd rather be living in an area that gives me more flexibility to be surrounded by the right types of people. But that's just my strategy. So I think for people that are in the phase one of their investment journey, in terms of strategies, what works well is there's no blueprint. You have to get a personalized approach. And that personalized approach is, what's your access to capital? Number one, how much deposit and debt can you service to buy a property? Then before we look at the capital growth, we look at rental income, because it's all good and well to say, let's buy in an area that's going to grow 10%. But if you can't afford to hold that for the long term, then it's irrelevant. So I look at the rental yield, then I look at the capital growth, and I want to maximize the capital growth for our passive investors based on the land and the natural performance of the region. Or if you're an active investor who's a bit more aggressive, well, then we're looking at a property that we can potentially flip or add value to. And that approach, I think, really only suits people that are within the industry. So if you're a builder, go down the active. If you're in lending or in real estate, you can consider active. If you're outside of industry, I would suggest start with passive, because active's a lot harder than it's made out to be.
Well said.
So yeah, man, that's kind of my blueprint, is personalize a strategy for each people at the beginning. Then when you start, if you're a buyer's agency and you're doing heaps of deals, then you have to start having a cookie cutter blueprint, because there's only so many. You have to start thinking commercially, because at the end of the day, buyer's agency is a business. And you got to think, if I've got 40 clients, I need to have properties for 40 clients that I can buy in a timely manner. So I might create a strategy for the sake of it being easier for me as a business to facilitate a purchase for this client. So sometimes the bigger the buyer's agency, it loses the personalized approach, because they can't be as bespoke, which is okay, because there's a segment of the marketplace for having a generalized strategy that can suit majority of people. So if we've got people that on average need to buy between 700 and a million, or 500 to 700, there's a general strategy that could suit a general mass of the population. However, in terms of opportunity cost, what's going to be the best personalized strategy? Then maybe a boutique firm could suit you initially. And then the advanced people, like I'll have people that have that, when you become a lot more advanced, it's not about having a personalized strategy or a blueprint. It's about finding a deal. If you find me a deal that stacks, I'll find the money. in the beginning, it's you've got access to limited money. We've got to use that money best we can to find a deal. Versus when you get advanced, if you find a good deal, I'll find the money.
Yeah.
So it switches.
Absolutely.
So there's kind of like 3 stages. At first, it's a personalized blueprint. Then it's kind of like a general blueprint that suits just because I need to access stock and you need something that's repeatable.
Yeah.
And then when you become advanced, it's not about, because you have so much expertise or access to funds, it's just about finding a deal that stacks. It could be buying anywhere, any investment type. They're not bound by a strategy. They just find me a deal, I'll find the money.
Cool.
Yeah.
Nice one. I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you very much. I want to ask you a question. I've done a small video on this, and I'll say it again if you need me to repeat this, yeah? You've interviewed a lot of people around the Australian property market, top talent as agents. When you look at the Australian property market, do you think it's unaffordable, i.e. borrowing capacity and deposits now lock people out? Do you think it's unattainable based on like a house price to debt, like income ratio? Yeah. Do you think it's unachievable? Like people think they can never get in?
Yeah.
Particularly say younger Australians? Or do you think it's underquoted, i.e. the listed price to the sale price?
It's a great question. So for me, my lens is I'm somebody that's entrepreneurial, commission-based, no capped income, super ambitious. And for me, I don't want external influences to dictate what I can achieve. Based on that, everything you just said is irrelevant to me.
Beautiful.
However, for someone who's maybe a PAYG, they're not as ambitious. That's just not who they are. They want to have a good life with their family. They don't want to work 6 days a week. They're happy to work 9 to 5. Maybe they're a nurse or a teacher, and that's great. I can't comment on that because that's not me. And for them, maybe it is unaffordable. Maybe there is a ceiling. So that's the trade-off, I guess. So for each person, it's a different response, right? For me, it's like, well, it could be unaffordable now, but you know what? I'm going to work my ass off to make sure it's not. Because at the end of the day, we are the alchemist of our own lives, and we don't set limitations. Like a lot of this chat's just to limit your mindset. And what I learned from the best people is they don't listen to interest rates. They don't care. Like people ask, what do you think is happening in the marketplace? What's happening here in the top 1%? They don't care. That's not even in their radar. They're just focused on their vision, and they're working to get that. And it will fall into place. Sometimes you fail, sometimes it goes well, but all in all, they go forward. Like they don't listen to the noise, the news. And
if I could have scripted an answer, it would have been pretty much like that. And that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Property buying, whether you're buying your own home or investing, it's decision-making and action-taking, right? So none of that insinuates waiting for the right time, worrying about rates. Mate, the perfect time would have been, when we were far too young to be buying property, right? Yeah. So you can't change the time that you're in the market, but you've got all these variables that you could. I mean, I've seen young people move into state, to get a lifestyle, and they can get into the market as opposed to being locked out of the Sydney market. I'm like, that takes some kahunas to chase a property dream, but they've got to zig when others are zagging. And
that's the thing, man. Like, I've got a few clients now where their parents are very big on don't rent vest, buy your owner occupied in Sydney, because if you don't, you're going to be priced out. But for them, where they can afford to live in Sydney for their money doesn't suit their goals. And for them, maybe buying out of state an investment property and then renting in the location they desire to be is that sweet spot for them. So, I guess it's, another thing, I've got a client who's my age, we were doing a deal for 4.8 million, my age, with a 2-year settlement. Like, this is how he knows his North Star so well that we are now going outside of the box to create this reality for him, whereby we got an offer and acceptance for a 2-year settlement on a property because he's that aggressive on making it a reality. So for him, the comment of affordability is not even, I don't care about affordability. I know what I want to achieve, and I'm going to put my balls on the line for it. Yeah, I might fail, but you got to have a crack at some point, right? So
you're working towards something, mate. You can't take anything away from.
But again, like, not everyone's like that. That's okay. Yeah, that's okay. Yeah.
our whole office listened to your interview
Oh,
at
really?
Big G, right? Graham
Oh, yeah,
Hyde.
Graham.
I'll include the link to that. I mean, you did quite a few episodes
Yeah.
with Graham. Good mate, obviously a legend in the finance industry as well. Did that episode surprise you? Because I mean, you guys got massive amount of engagement off the back of that, not intentionally. I think it just
not intentionally.
it just had a life of its own.
Yeah, it did.
And I was just sitting back watching this thing unfold. I was like, I think it even surprised me a little bit because it got the industry talking a lot. Obviously, you know, he can ruffle feathers within the industry, and he's not shy about that as well. But then, from a consumer or customer perspective, he really got in their face around financial literacy or maybe how much the wool gets pulled over their eyes. Did that surprise you?
I think for people that are within our industry that are financially literate, the strategies Graham talks about aren't revolutionary. They're the basics. But for most Australians, the basics is what they haven't been taught. And so when you have somebody like Graham who's super relatable because he's not suit and tie, he speaks the way he wants to speak authentically, the masses could relate to that. And it just hit home. And it was like this, although what he was saying was not revolutionary, especially if you're within our industry and you understand the strategy, but it was revolutionary in the sense that he was the first man to really maybe there are others, but from what I know, he's like somebody who's putting himself out there, publicly giving back to the community and really sharing, hey guys, here's what financial literacy could look like, here's what we're not taught, and here's how we can overcome some of the hurdles. So I think it surprised me the amount of people within our industry that were giving him hate because the reality is, like, why aren't you doing it then? Like, if it's so basic, why aren't you putting yourself out on camera and adding value? Because the amount of replies we got of people that were so grateful, the amount of people that felt like their lives could have changed was massive.
Yeah.
And then I was also blown away by how many people don't actually know the basics.
Yeah.
So it was, but in all, mate, it would just go to show, like, and mate, there's parts of Graham which like, not everyone's perfect. Not everyone's the ideal person. Like, there are parts of Graham which not everyone's going to like, consumer, industry specific or whatnot. And he'll admit that. Like, so I think what was good from my experience with Graham was, like, it showed me how being the fact of giving without needing to receive, how much that can create success for you. Like, he's so big on gratitude and giving. And look, maybe parts of it are for him to market or to do this or that, but to see it firsthand and to see him give away $50,000 of his own money to people to help change lives was crazy. And because I got to see all the comments and inboxes, like, it was just, that blew me away. So for me, what I learned out of it, the finance side, did I learn a lot? He questioned even a lot of my thought processes, but what I really took out of it was just the fact that he's gone out there, put himself out there to add value first before taking, and that's created success. So I learned a lot of that. That's what I took out of it more than anything, rather. But it did show that there's a lot of Australians that just don't know the basics.
Yeah.
And I think as professionals, a lot of us think that writing a loan and just being an order taker is being a broker, where he challenges that and is like, well, hey, being a financial expert is actually maybe charging for your time up front, helping people understand, and not just being somebody who writes a loan. So I think it ruffled a few feathers.
Oh, absolutely, mate. It got noticed. I even dropped him a message, and he's a demon, so he's working at all hours.
Yeah.
I get a message back at like 11 o'clock, and he's like, mate, I want to try and get him on, but he's a busy man.
He is,
traveling and everything. But I think what he did was exactly that. He just popped the hood on this whole thing and said, and we've got 19,000 mortgage brokers in this country. I'm not taking a pot shot, but you got a classic bell curve. Classic bell curve. It's like any industry. My daughter's in kindy. I'm sure there's a bell curve of talent in kindergarten as well. Those that are sound, top, like industry professionals, the top 1 to 20% are usually doing the heavy lifting for the remaining 80%. And we see it time and time again. And probably the lower echelon in our industry probably took offense to that, because if you're going to get offended by it, it probably means that you're shining up a mirror to some of the, I guess, the poor practices that go on, which is order taking, which is not being strategic in terms of, just set the loan and forget, versus trying to build that relationship and take people on a journey to go, where do you actually want to get to financially,
true.
as opposed to I'm just going to write a loan and sail into the sunset with my check.
Mate, 100%. And he put it on me. He's like, Dan, what would you rather, your mum buy a property through you or through me? Like, who's you're a buyer's agent. I've done $5 million personally in income this year buying and selling property. Yeah, you're a buyer's agent, but who would you rather your mum be serviced by, me or you? It's like it even made me feel like small. So I get where a lot of people would have been had the shits. But I think, again, like whether you love him or hate him, what we can learn is that he put himself out to add value. Yes, a lot of what he says is designed for marketing at times, but he still adds a tremendous amount of value as well. So
Yeah, as do you, mate. I think what you're doing there with both sides,
thank you.
really, and that's not blowing any smoke, mate. I think what you're doing is exceptional there. Young guy, like you said, what's the best way to shortcut or supercharge my my way into this industry? You've gone straight to the top, whereas other people are trying to slowly, incrementally work their way up. If that's the way you take your approach to business and yourself, I can imagine you do the same thing with people's portfolios, where you go,
Yeah.
I'm not going to stop until I get.
Yeah, I'm
best
very
outcome.
much like that. And sometimes to my fault at times. But yeah.
When you say that's your fault, how do you?
So like I was on the phone. So like I will drag out the time of buying to make sure I get a 10 out, like get the best outcome rather than sacrifice. Like from a business perspective, buying an 8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10 would tick all boxes. The client wins business wise. We're shortening the buy times. But for me, I'd rather get a 10 out of 10.
Yeah.
But
So where's that 2 out of 10 lost then on you? So the deal comes on your desk. You think it's 8.
yeah.
You want to get to a 10. What are the remaining two parts that you're
Can I
leaving?
buy it off market? Can I buy it below market value? What's the rental yield? What do the numbers look like? Is it north facing, level block? What are the attributes, So, and that's just part of, eventually if I grow the business, I will have to sacrifice just as a bit, like it gets to that point where you're going to have to. It comes back to like getting a strategy that can suit the masses. I think we'll get a point in that conversation where if I choose to be that big, I will have to. But
Yeah, it's great. Scale is it's like anything, right? It's a blessing and a curse where something has to give a little bit. Either it's your time and you have less connection to your clients, and you got to scale. Then someone else in your team manages that, and then it's open to their interpretation. Or you grow the other way, which is you're now having to perform it at 80% level on property side. And go, well, 80% is pretty good. It can't all be 100%, but when you're at this stage, you can be you have your fingerprints on everything.
Yeah, that's it. Like to give you an example, one of our clients we bought an apartment for, that suburb has only had 15 apartments sold this year within his budget. Out of those 15, I would say only 10 would be suitable. So there's not much volume of supply, right? So as a business, I couldn't take on 3 clients that wanted to buy that same type of asset. Although that asset is like a 10 out of 10 in terms of performance and the strategy, there's just from a business perspective, that strategy can't be used for the masses because of the limitations around supply. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Yeah, cool. Again, being around a lot of people in the industry and you look forward, for example, where do you see the Australian property market kind of headed? I know it's a broad brush statement. I mean, you focus around the hills and
it's a good
Sydney
question,
market. What's your kind of outlook at the moment?
In the affordability price point between 5 to 1 million, I see that demand is very strong from both owner occupiers because of the grant, as well as investors still they're just changing their appetite. So a few years ago when interest rates were low, they could afford to buy higher growth, lower yielding. They've just changed their appetite for higher yielding, possibly less growth. But there's a big portion of the market that are still investors. I see the baby boomer marketplace that have extremely low LVRs. The thing with Australia, right, is you'll know this, is that we've got a very low aggregate debt to equity rate, debt to value ratio. Yeah. So there's still a lot of people that own their homes outright or have low mortgages. Based on that, their sensitivity to things like interest rate rises may not be as great as what people think at times. But let's say the affordability price point, the challenge we're seeing is that there's just not as much volume of supply as what we thought there would be relative to the level of hurt we would have thought there would be in the marketplace. But off the back of that, due to things like migration and build costs being so high, we're not building enough to meet that demand. There's still a lot of grants. There's still a lot of demand for people buying in that affordability price point. So although there is higher levels of interest rates and what have you, I'm still seeing a lot of growth in that price point. However, when we start going from 1 to 2 million, it's slowing down in the amount of buyers per property.
Okay.
So like I was at an auction on the weekend, they wanted 2 to 2.1. The highest bid was 1.7.
Yeah, right.
So that is starting to be the case. But that vendor, being a baby boomer, may just pull their property off the market and not sell. And if that becomes a case where we're seeing a lot less buyer demand and prices coming, people not wanting to pay market value or a premium, I would say that stock levels will retract even more than what they are based on people wanting to retain holding their asset, which in Australia we're taught to sell your car, reduce the holiday, reduce your expenses before you sell that house. So that's my opinion, but it's just my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, I'm cool with opinions. So in that example, you said you went to this auction.
Yeah.
They didn't want to sell it at 1.7. Were you there on behalf of a client?
Yeah.
At that point, are you thinking about negotiating, or is that at that point? How did that?
So
as an example,
the thing is, for that property, they're stuck at that price. Like they're not going to come to the price we want to buy at, and that's just the reality. Then due to their motivation to sell, so it comes down to people's motivation. But what I am seeing in the marketplace more regularly is a lot of divorce, and people now for whatever reason, when you go through selling divorce, it can either go two ways. It can go through the solicitors where they have to go to auction, or you can't buy it prior or pre or off market. Or then there's sometimes where you get divorce deals and they're just so fed up. They're like, I can't deal with my partner anymore. Just sell it off market. Like, I don't want to have open homes. People just get rid of it. So you've got people that there will be opportunity, but the challenge we're seeing now is stock levels are low, build costs are up. The gap between developers' margins aren't as strong as what they have been as well, which is hard for people wanting to flip. And
I think flipping is also, it's unknown where the market will be when
the market's going to be.
You want to list this property and sell it. That's probably the biggest issues that we've got at the moment. Like any small scale developments or renos
really
to flip,
tough.
that resaleability. It's like, what market are we going to be in when you sell? And obviously, you want to be the eternal optimist. There's got to be a sense of reality going.
100%.
13 rate rise and the property market hasn't slowed down. We're talking potentially one more rate rise, and I don't think it'll be a straw that breaks the camel's back, but certainly we'll put the screws on
100%.
a lot more households as well.
100%.
So it's a combination of factors, mate. But interesting.
It
makes our lives interesting.
It does. Mate, I'd hope. I've got a few people that I'm looking at flipping as well, and it's like we'd love to see the market change for that sense, but. Mate, you think every time you think it's going to go left, it goes right. You think it's going to move, it doesn't move at all. What I would say is like a lot of I've got people that are even owner builders that are conservative, knocking back deals because they're worried that what if things start to come down? So if an owner builder who can get things done cheaper and knocking things back, it's becoming harder for people that have money in employing builders. But
cool. Hey, Dan, thanks very much, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Mate, do you mind if I ask you a question?
Go for it.
Being on your side of the fence, having dealt with a whole range of guests and people that you've had on the show, what would be your biggest piece of advice for people out there when it comes to doing a podcast and meeting people?
Thanks, man. I like that you flipped the script. Good on you.
What have you gotten out of podcasting?
I mean, like similar to yourself, I get to sit in front of so many people. So the 10,000 hour rule, I'll crack that, right? Personally, I think what it also gives you this ability to have a conversation with a lot of people with no agenda. So people come onto the podcast, guess for yourself. All you're trying to do is say, look, I'm sitting on some information. I want to share that knowledge. That's what I love about it. People are, like you said, the top 1% want to share their knowledge because they got a gift to a lot of people. So I think for me, I've been really fortunate that when I reach out to guests, they're like, I'll jump on, or people have reached out and they want to come on as well. I love that. So we give that opportunity to people. What I've learned is, I keep coming back to it, action taking. And so when you talk about, and I would have looked at it from a podcast perspective, I think they say 90% of podcasts don't go more than 7 episodes.
Yeah.
There's something along that line. I'm like, I just have to crack past 7. I'm like, I'm in the top 10%.
Yeah.
And then I went a very, very long time without even looking at our stats around engagement. I didn't want to know. I just wanted to help. And I got challenged on that, which was, hey, mate, but if you can amplify this and you can help more people, then why don't you want to know your stats? And why don't you want to know what's working and what isn't working? So again, I kind of said, all right, well, I'll double down and see what's working, and went into our statistics, went into our downloads, went into our engagement, and said, okay, how do we focus on this a little bit more? You know, you tweak with the SEO, or you tweak with the titles or the thumbnails. And so what got you to this point doesn't work to get you to the next level of growth as well. And then I think it was a really good episode that I had with Jamin Fraser, life coach. So a little bit left of center. And one of his big things was, what game are you playing? And
I love that.
You know, initially you think, oh, Stephen Bartlett's like the be all and end all of like podcasting.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, I don't want that. And why am I chasing that? So do I edit the videos to be like that? And I was like, no, mate, all I want to do is have a meaningful impact on property investors to get them to the top 1% of property investing. I want to be part of their journey. I don't want a 30-year mortgage. I want to enjoy time with my kids. I want to travel, and I want to build a property portfolio that when my kids look back at me, they're like, holy shit, you did something with your life and the money that you earned. I'm like, yeah, this is the game that I'm playing. And it gave me pure clarity on that as well.
That's beautiful, man.
Oh, thanks.
What game are you playing? I love that.
Yeah. That's why I keep coming back to the episode. People are like, obviously everyone, they're like children. You know, you love them, but sometimes one's more equal than the other. And I say that episode to me was really kind of hammered that home, which is, it goes for investing in property. If you're investing just to tell your friends how many properties you've got, you're playing the wrong game. If you're trying to build a business to then drive an expensive vehicle to show that you got wealth, you're playing the wrong game. Maybe that's the game that you want to play, no judgments. But those games get found out pretty quickly as well, because the gloss wears off, the bills stack up, the team issues stack up, the client issues stack up. A nice car means diddly when you're trying to put out all these fires.
100%. Mate, that's well said, man. Do you mind if I ask what would be your best piece of advice for me? Selfishly.
Nah, go for it. I'd say you don't ever give up. And I think that's something that you've got in spades when I speak to you. I've heard you. There's a sense of persistence and resilience, and you're young. So for me, I'm like, use that time to your advantage. Tell you what's young, buy properties. You'll never regret it. For example, surround yourself with winners. And I think you'll gain a lot of new friends, which means you might lose some old friends as well as you mature and go on this journey. Some people just won't be on that journey with you.
Did that happen in your journey?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not that it's like I'm better than anyone else. It's just like I headed in a different direction, and I had to kind of change the network or the people around me to go, I want to be around like people that I want to be a small fish in a big pond. And I sit around a lot of brokers, and they just want to complain about how long it is to sit on hold to Westpac. I'm like, that's not my problem. I want to be around top talent. I want to be around people that are making big changes. I want to be around people that are hiring team that then you have an impact on their lives and their families' lives, and that ripple effect gets bigger and bigger. So when you're hanging around people that want to complain about stuff that they can easily change or control, the amount of times I speak to people, I'm like, you can go and buy more property. Oh, but then this, I was like, I can't hear this anymore. Like your excuses are just that, they're excuses. And I think, I'm not sure if I'm showing my age, but I think with time you grow less empathetic of that. And that's it's a hard thing to say.
Yeah, wow.
But I've only got limited time. So in my week, I can only speak to so many people. And if I keep coming out with people that have excuses, I can't work with that. The same goes for my team. When the second that someone says, I'm confused, in my mind, they're dead. If I hear a team member say that, they know it. You're dead to me, because it shows that you've got no ability to solve a problem. You can't think laterally. That's helpless language. And that's one thing that drives me bonkers, which is when I hear helpless language, I'm like, nothing I say to you can change you or not even motivate you. You just can't move the dial because you want to be stuck in this helpless state. And so when people come and go, oh, the market, I was like, are you kidding me? I've helped young people get into the market. I've helped 6-year-olds get into the market. What's your excuse? And I've got a really low tolerance sometimes for excuses and BS.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
Well, mate, it sounds like if I was in your situation, I would too.
You just pick your battles, man,
Yeah.
after a while. And I think at the start, you take as many coffee meetings as you can. You get in front of as many people as you can. And after a while, then you value your own time a lot more, because I've gone from being the hunter to being the hunted now. So I can't take meetings at the drop of a hat. I can't be on phone calls at the drop of a hat. My day is scheduled week, 2 weeks in advance. So you really, really value your time and where it's going. And I really value my time with my kids. So that's a different priority that I had a few years ago. Yeah.
Would you say your motivation's changed? Sorry if I'm
okay.
overstepping. I'm actually just really curious. Has your motivation changed since when you started to now? That drives you?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, at the start, I worked like an absolute weapon. I did the hours. I'm lucky I'm married to Bernadette, because if I was married to anyone else, I probably would have been divorced. Like, that's how much I worked. She left her job to come join this business, for example. So it takes a special person, a special partner to be on this journey. And she's put up with all sorts of shit, right? Like when the business wasn't going well, wasn't making any money. Then you get different problems as well. Money doesn't change us, right? I still drive a very humble vehicle. But I think now the priorities have changed, where I only get this time with my kids once. And I think for me, they probably got the leftovers when I got home and I'm buggered and I'm tired from a big day at the office, and they get the leftover Aaron. Whereas now I'm like, no, I want them to get a better version of me. So that takes a lot of personal work. I've got to do my own coaching. I want to do my own training at the gym. I want to be around for a long time. I don't want to be a grumpy bastard, like I want to be fun dad as well. I want to be a switched on husband and attentive as well. But that's a lot of roles to play on top of being a people manager, being a broker to clients. It's industry advocate, for example. I do some coaching with other brokers. So for me, man, I'm switching gears a lot, but I enjoy that as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Man, I really appreciate you sharing, letting me ask a couple questions. I hope I haven't stepped.
Don't say that at all. I love the energy, mate. And like I say, for all our guests, if you're interested in reaching out to Dan, talking about property investing, building a portfolio, we'll include the details to both sides as well. Also, give a mad plug to your podcast. I think you're doing some amazing things. Particularly that episode with Graham. I found that our team found that profound as well. Like you said, it kind of rattled a few cages, and I think financially it should have a massive impact for a lot of people. If you love this podcast, you'll love that episode as well. So that's a wrap for another episode of the Australian Podcast. We'll talk to you soon.